this is group 2, our second video to continue our webinar. So the next question, what should educators know about the experiences of students of color who are misidentified for special education?
Well, in the fourth article, it talks about how you should, for the African American child, their 9 learning characteristics of spirituality, harmony, affect, with their emotional expressiveness, communalism, movement, verb, hopefully I'm pronouncing that correctly, expressive, orality, and social time are very important learning characteristics to know about the African American, whereas for the Hispanic population, from the same Ford article, the family is very important. Machismo, the father figure, is very important to remember that, and that social cooperation rather than competition is very important to their characteristics of learning.
So I think really kind of, Holly, like you said, kind of a summary is just getting to know each of the different cultures and what is important and how they view education, and how their mannerisms might be different at home than as it is at school.
Mm-hmm. I think it's also really important to think about, as teachers, the consequences of our actions and our choices. So if we're making the choice to label a kid of having a learning disability or possibly a eating disorder, that has statistical connection to higher suspension rates, expulsion rates, and also is related to the school to prison pipeline. So knowing that even if this kid is acting differently than another kid in class, it might, really having to think contextually about that kid as an individual and falsely diagnose and possibly put this kid on a path to drop out or worse. So really having that, understanding is important.
Okay. What factors impact the under-identification of students of color or gifted education? I think this goes back to some of the topics we talked about earlier in our first discussion, as well as previous module, how we have to really make sure that the assessments that we're giving the kids are not biased in any way. We have to make sure that they are in their native language if they are English language learners, and that we really need to avoid the stereotype threat. I thought it was in the article by Ford, Washington, Wright, and Henfield, where they talked about the stereotype threat, where students already, when they walked into testing with the school psychologist, that they already felt as though they were at risk for being identified, and being identified negatively versus positively. So I think that we have to really, as teachers and as the support for the students, is to really look at, what their student perception is and how they feel. But that, we need to make sure that they know that they can succeed, and that we give them assessments that allow them to succeed, and not just make them stand out even more and not even get the services that they qualify for, especially with gifted, we are so under-identified in that category.
I think also for the gifted program, it's just making sure that we're not looking at students with the deficient lens that we've talked about in previous modules, and to make sure that we have those high expectations for all students regardless of their cultural background.
Right. I think, some of the articles talked about implicit bias, and when teachers are making the list of who to recommend for gifted, sometimes they might have some stereotypes of students of color that even if the student of color is clearly an exceptional student, they might not recommend them because they assume that they have home support to get through the harder assignments where they're not going to have someone there to help them. And a teacher might think that by not them, they're like not, they're going to, if they recommend them, they're going to set them up for failure, but they're really just stereotyping them and preventing them from having opportunities. So, keeping that in mind as well.
And the last question, what can educators do to address the under-identification of students of color for gifted education? Again,
Go ahead. In the right word qualification or article, they talked about how teachers, especially in pre-K, need to learn the early characteristics and traits. Like in language and learning, they need to be aware that gifted children's abilities are they talk and read early and have an extensive vocabulary, enjoy self-expression, especially in discussion, is proficient in drawing, music, or other arts, and look at motor development and motivation. Walked early, is driven to explore things, is extremely active and goal-oriented, and then, of course, personal social care, including interacts with adults more effectively than with other children, which is very interesting to see. Self-directed and independent learner, and demonstrates awareness of issues such as death, war, and world hunger. So if we get to know those characteristics, especially if we're gonna, like me, who I hope to go back down to the early learners to start really noticing that, so I can start the process of referring kids early enough.
I can answer that. I think in our earlier discussion, but really thinking about what language accommodations need to be made to identify EL students that are gifted, and also
Good point.
mind reading the article about involving Black achievement in STEM, and really keeping in mind like statistics of who is in the highest paid careers in our society in the biggest industries such as STEM, and kind of as teachers and educators to affect or like purposefully putting kids, on track to be for careers like this that they might not, if a teacher's not encouraging them or exposing them to type of careers, they might not see themselves as someone who can do that because they're not really portrayed in the media as someone who does that. So really like being that advocate for them and pushing them towards, goals. I think is really, really well inclusion and keeping that in mind.
Lizzie, your discussion just reminded me, I just saw a commercial on TV the other day, and it was actually two. There was one where it was a colored female who was one of the first, I'm drawing a blank, but she was one of the first in her field. And then there was another one where it showed a younger lady. She was with NASA, and she was like showing these girls around NASA, and it was a whole group of girls of all different racial backgrounds and everything, and was just saying, who wants to be an astronaut? And all these girls raised their hand, and I think that really just kind of speaks to what you were talking about, Lizzie.
Mm-hmm. And I think, and to kind of go off of both of you, go off of everybody, is that we really need to include multi-dimensional activities within our classroom to give that exposure to the kids, that they may not have had exposure to, but are something that they are really good at. That they might be more science-oriented or critical thinking-oriented, and providing those opportunities for the kids, whether it be in school, extracurricular activities, after school programs, to give that exposure and to really support them to feed off of what their skill sets are. And, as a teacher, we might see that these are skills that that they might need an assessment as a hands-on project versus a written response, and really let the kids thrive in that sense. And also to involve the parents and, give them opportunities to see what's in the classroom and what other options are there, to really support their students as well and be an advocate for them, just as much as we are.
Because they can be as challenging as having a student with a learning disability, except on the other extreme is making sure that you're accommodating those with disabilities, but also challenging those that are gifted. That's such a challenge. And those are the kids that react well to like a project-based learning kinds of activity. So, but yeah, that was always my struggle though, was when we did have a few gifted children, how to keep them engaged and challenged when the majority of my class was, reading below grade level or, terribly below grade level. And then you have those extremes that are way at the top. So that's quite a challenge.